experience with the crime genre dates back to, I think it was in 2009, which was released in 2010, my first book in Bengali called Chokro, where I broke the traditional concept of detective, because detective is a myth. It has been created in fictions right from Edgar Allan Poe until the present moment, both in English and Bengali literature. And I said, in 21st century, these myths don't work. Investigations may be done by different people, but at the end of the day, the solution may come from an entirely different person who is not related to the investigations. So, where the reader is looking for the murderer and the motive, the reader is as well looking for the detective as well. So that was my first book, Chokro, which became a bestseller and has remained a bestseller for a long time. And by kind courtesy of my brother, Mr. Partha Pratim Rai, he translated it in English, and it came out as the Fulcrum. In Fulcrum, he added certain more chapters which were missing in Chokro, with my permission, of course. And when the second edition of Chokro was released, I included those chapters to give it a full form. It was not only a question of murder, it was a question of every murder has a philosophy. Most of the common things that happen with murder, this is important because my Eternal Mayhem is related to it. Most of the murders are basically either there's a motive of either money, power, sex, and all those kinds of things. How many people have actually fathomed the philosophy behind the murder? There I took you to a stage where basically it is a Plato's third stage, where basically whether the person is a murderer or a savior, time will decide. And that is called the Plato's third stage. And I try to describe that when a person reaches that stage, be it Hitler, be it Jesus, or be it anyone else, they are working towards a bigger philosophy. Now that philosophy can sometimes be not acceptable to the society, and sometimes it is acceptable to the society, and sometimes it's acceptable and rejected to the society. So it's a matter of time that this, the judgment of this third stage of their actions, or rather the third stage is judged by different people over centuries in different perspective. So that was my starting off with the thriller bit. And then after that, I wrote a geo-economic thriller, basically on international geo-economics actually. It's Pursuit. Pursuit is actually, though it is international, it has its considerable base in India, and especially in Sikkim, in a Buddhist monastery, with obviously conspirations, global conspirations worldwide. So that was more of a prediction of geoeconomics of the world. And that was written sometime in 2011 or 12, I don't remember, something like that. And after 6 years now, most of the things are working out just as is deemed. Now that is as far as the books are concerned. And after that, I had gone in to write other things, of which my brother, Partha Pratim Rai, actually was writing a book on genetics. And he was reading a book on genetics, and he is in fact writing the book on genetics, basically on Huntington's chorea. Now, one of the things of reading here and there, I came across racial superiority. Now, I've lived in Western world for more than 20 years, and at every stage I had to face this racism and racial superiority. So at some stage I thought, no, what is race? Let me find out scientifically, not what The Anglo-Saxons preach, but what is the truth of race? If you want to know the truth of race, you have to go back to the history, you have to go back to the racial origin, you have to go back to the genetics. And then I went on to study the whole of genetics, including genetic cloning, which is very much a debatable subject. And also studied genetics, which is a debatable subject. And also the origin of human races, how it originated for African community, and then it spread worldwide from there. So if it is originated from African, how can the Sphere be a superior race? Then obviously came the Hitler's concept, the Lebensborn concept, which was basically instituted by Himmler. And there also Hitler tried to create a genetically superior race. So that was that more or less ended with the end of the World War. Now, genetics could be written in different ways, this genetic cloning. It could be written as non-fiction. It could be written as a narrative. I thought of giving it a sort of overall sort of facade of a thriller. Thrillers are something which people want to read. And by the way, if it's a fast-moving thriller, people will definitely read it, and then they can find out, or they can get to know the scientific nitty-gritties of genetics. So there you are. That was the birth of a scientific thriller, which is Eternal Mayhem. Now, from Pursuit, which was basically based in India and Sikkim, there was obviously meetings in America, in Burj Al Arab, in Russia, St. Petersburg, and also in... Before I go into the details of Eternal Mayhem, I would like to thank two people, and rather three people, who have helped me with this book. One is Partha Pratim Rai, my brother, my friend, Purnasri Nag, and Ashish Kumar Chatterjee, with their valuable inputs, which have given it a very good shape. I'll read out to you my preface, which will give you a brief idea as why I wrote this book called Eternal Mayhem. Let me turn back to the pages. No, I'm not dictating, I'm just reading it. In his book Poetics, the Greek philosopher Aristotle asserted, suspense is the fulcrum of all thrillers, with a fusion of trepidation, thrill, expectancy, anxiety, collated with a feel of pandering tensity, captivation, fright, fervor. The reader sees with teeth the plot as it converges to an aleatory, cryptic, and stirring climax, leaving them to ruminate. Typically a baddie-driven one, bogged by red herrings, twist to a bewitching cliffhanger. Pigeonhole, the author destroys hope, elicits curiosity, springs surprise out of the blue. This is the form of customary mystery, psychologic, political, or romantic subgenres. Gone are the days of ancient epics, Epic of Gilgamesh, Homer's Odyssey, Mahabharata. With evolving era, the art of storytelling has undergone a radical mutation. Revering them, my attempt was to carve a new scientific genre relevant to this era. I repeat again, scientific genre. The prevalent construct of a private detective is trumpe d'honneur. My debut to the ambit was with a novel perception, flighting the abstruse idea with a realistic one. Among the legion deaths, deputed buffs could carry the probe. Many quotidian folks could astutely scrutinize the conundrum until one hits the final bonanza. With this caveat, it capsized the age-old detective myths initiated by Edgar Allan Poe, which was telling you before, to a realistic podium. Though the probe was by opposite folks, solution came from the victor. In my first novel, Chokro, later in English as The Fulcrum, amongst hierarchical ways of several murders, the book lover is in pursuit of the killer Buffo duo. Later in Pursuit 2013, Conundrum 2017, besides the original homicidal methods, I ciphered a subtly furtive, profound insight into the extropy of global dynamics. I fused the elided outlook of trelicious thrillers with a philosophy for humanity. The traditional protagonist waffled between the effector and the seer. Scientific thrillers involved a sixth sense into the core of science, history, evolution, with a far-flung eagle view of progress. Eternal Mayhem is one such kind. Spotless adrenaline laser, a touch chalk and cheese grand narrative with numerous puzzling scientific murders occurring worldwide. This complex cliffhanger keeps the reader's adrenaline spurting from the onset as scientific murders take place in exotic global locations. Now, I want to tell you something about scientific murders. The weapons used by traditional people were the usual things like drugs, pistol, knife, these kind of very traditional things. In fact, in Chokru, I broke those traditional weapons and brought new scientific methods of murder. Not for them to be practiced, but they can be done. And being a doctor, I had insight into the other ways of murder, which can murder stuff which you can have it in your everyday life, and they can cause. Even in the next book, Conundrum, which I'm writing, another thriller, I have brought in new techniques of murder. And this was the same thing here, also in Eternal Mayhem. Sometimes a person is killed with an iPad. Nobody can dream of murder with an iPad. Yes, it's possible. And that's why I've shown how it is possible. Anyway, coming back to the old thing is, this complex cliffhanger keeps the reader's adrenaline spurting from the onset as scientific murders take place in exotic global locations. Well, people enjoy holidays at beautiful places. I've taken you on a holiday to beautiful places where beautiful ladies or handsome men commit heinous murders in a picturesque sort of background. I would say picturesque locale. Beautiful lassies, intelligentsia, global scientists are trapped in this white-knuckle masterpiece with all the twirl and twists that will keep the readers wrapped. This volume is more than a murder mystery to transport you from the comfy of your lounger to the steaming isles, be it Bali, Fiji, Hawaii, Maldives, Bora Bora, Punta Cana, or exotic nooks of Jamaica and Puerto Rico. The gripping craft keeps you on your feet as the global scientific world of genetics gets swept in the woodnet. Amid the scientific essence of genetic cloning research, it's a scarper for the familiar concepts to the roots of civilization, exactly what I was talking to you about. Where is our origin, how it has migrated, and that is not based on hearsay or preaching, that's based on genetic facts, with its resultant diversities. It reveals shocking truths so far clandestine. The apogee seals in a startling, eye-opening truth of humanity, offering something new to the thriller genre. Now that is as far as the thriller bit is concerned. That is as far as the intro is concerned. Now, leaving aside the intro, there are a few things to note, actually. There are a few other things which I want to make it clear. The language is, obviously, English is the main language, but in addition to it, Bengali has come in because that's my mother tongue. In addition to that, German has come in, Spanish has come in, Romanian has come in, because I was fortunate to have a Romanian friend when I was working in Kuwait, and she was very poetic, and the poetic language, I learned it from her. In addition to that, there are a few other languages which I've used in different places to give it the feel of the place. Also, There are a lot of slangs which normally you don't even use it in standard literature. But if you are talking about someone in the back streets of Bucharest, he won't be talking the literary English. His dialogue would be the slang of Romania or Bucharest, whatever language you are talking about. So these language variations you can find from South America to mainly Spanish and Romanian to German. If you are working at one of the bars in strip clubs in Hamburg, then the slang is entirely different. And I have been fortunate enough to stay at these places or visit them at some stage, and was familiar with the language, so it was not a difficult writing in this language. So in true sense, it was an international thriller. It starts from India, takes you to Bali, from there to Germany, from there to Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Iran. Yeah, Arabic is there as well, I forgot to tell you. So it takes you in different parts of the world. The other key thing is, when it's a scientific thriller, there is very little scope of literary input. I have tried to fuse with that. I read a few of the paragraphs where I tried to put in a literary effort to give it a literary standard. Thriller is not about science, murders. Obviously, it should be fast-moving. Thriller is also a literature in its own right. And I wanted to give it a literary form by putting in literature in the... There is also exotic dishes that have been put forward in this novel from different parts of the world. As you go on visiting different parts of the world, you come across their common dishes, their local dishes, and you get a flavor of it. I had written more of it, and obviously it was my brother Partha Pratim and Punno Srilag, both of them vehemently copy editing, took away quite a bit of it, much to my liking, because otherwise it would have got too boring. In fact, it became boring, and they felt it was boring, so the copy editing was done beautifully again. And I must thank them for their input in the matter. I have also been quite sort of explicit about description of sex. I'll read to you one paragraph which describes a type of sex we'll understand is a lesbian sex. The setting is in Lime Cay, which is off Kingston, some 15-minute ride from Kingston on a boat. A place called Lime Cay, where obviously a murder will be committed. The calm briny squish stroked their boobs and saucy chinks. Jobs could wait, not rising fleshy crave. Brine on liquor flung them off the shelf for a bus before the gush. Stirred, they poured their titties, licked pussies in glee. As the dark pecked the grey, the moon gleamed on their bare silhouettes. The duo boogied in riveting pulse, snarled in lust. They stroked their boobs in lustful bliss, their balmy lips halting in coarse shingles, lips parted to suck the nipples, their fingers slid into covert slits. The gush of their luxuria left them panting as the moon folded under the clouds, leaving the duo in the dark. Now, I would like to refer to a poem I've mentioned. It is actually J. Grinson's poem in 1855, The Hurling and the Slave, where he describes, "For the great ends hath heaven's supreme command, brought the black savage from his native land, trains for each purpose in his barbarian mind, by discovery tamed, enlightened, and refined, instructs for a master race to draw wise modes of polity and fans of law, involves his soul with faith, his heart with love. Zarathustra or Zoroaster has been mentioned repeatedly, and one of his a poem which is taken from Thus Spoke Zarathustra is also mentioned regarding the evolution of the race. Thriller is not only science, murders, fast-moving story, but it's poetry as well. And I have tried to put in a bit of my poetic poetic input. Actually, it is written in Romanian, which you won't understand, so I'm translating in English. Let me embrace you in the glow of the candlelight of the vast expanse of darkness, loneliness behind. Let me accept you in the eternal melody of my last sonata's ultimate chord. Another paragraph from Hawaii, actually. She could see a blurry ray of light amid the dark. Bit by bit, it lit up the east as the moon pepped. Trillion star specks strewn in dark veil hailed the empress. She oogled at the eon moral tale of ether kissing the calm briny. Like the empress divine, the moon slowly emerged like a mermaid in ocean reefs. The ocean roar turned to the opus of celestial lilt. Tipsy Sandy was lost in Zionic trance. Now coming to the scientific bit, or the historical bit actually. Basically the racial origin was from Africa and through Zebel Quafze to Eridu along the Euphrates banks. And this was in early dynastic period. In the process of discussion of genetics, I have gone into the Y chromosomal atom, YMRCA, and Y DNA, and Y chromosome is more important than the X chromosome regarding patrilineal heritage. I won't explain to you all the details, but actually this originated from the Y chromosomal Adam, who lived about 338,000 years back. Preferably it was, I think, between 230, exactly it is difficult to say the date, but it should be something from 237,000 years to 581,000 years back. Now this genetic is inheritance. Sometimes people complain that why females are not given superiority. The answer is here actually, which you'll find it in the book, that Y-linked base pairs, there are 200 base pairs, are more stable than any X base pair of genes. My book is on genetic cloning. So that is another controversial subject which the world is wary about. Whether genetic cloning should be done, is it ethical? Could Hitler's concept be instituted in today's literature, which was basically the Lebensborn concept? And I have discussed this in modern light. I won't give you the story to say where it landed up to, but I have put forward all the ethical dilemmas that is associated with genetic cloning research. As an author, you can't be committal as what is right and wrong. You can only throw the questions, the ethical questions that is bugging the community, whoever wants to think about it. And when I see so much amount of racism in the world, it pains me, because at the end of the day, this is a hypothetical situation which certain people have got it in their nerves, and this book was written to shed them of their ego and come back to a more humanitarian approach. Humanity. There is no color, there is no creed, there is no race. Most of the races have evolved through migration, mingling, and cross-marriage, so there is nothing called an ideal race. And that actually gives the novel actually points out the mistakes people are making in this madness of this racial superiority and madness. And that I have tried to establish from history as well as from genetics scientifically. I will not discuss much about the murder story because that will take the thrill away of the whole plot. But one thing I wanted to say, that being a student of science, I've been fortunate enough to have a background of the science and put it in literature. In fact, in all my novels, I've tried to put in science somewhere. In my first novel, On Nishon, later in English as The Quest, has been taken from a concept of Venn diagram theory of mathematics. My Bengali novel, Tomake, later in English as The Moment, is from a concept of vertical time. And the other novel, which basically is Canvassé, is Newton's color theory. And I've tried to intermingle physics, science, medicine, all into literature to give a comprehensive picture. For others, it might be difficult, even the literary guys, to go into the depths which, by virtue of my profession, I could easily penetrate and get to the depths of it. So is the case in Eternal Mayhem. I mean, it's very difficult for a doctor, non-medical person to write Eternal Mayhem because there are so much nitty-gritties of genetics and science, and unless you're familiar with them right from the start, you cannot explain to a common reader how all these things in very simple terms. One of the essence of explaining a difficult subject to a very common reader is to make it legible for them. For that, one has to grasp the subject. Once you have got a grasp of the subject, you can deliver it in a very simple form for everyone to understand. I don't expect any of my readers to be scientists or genetics. If there are one or two, that I'm lucky. But I expect my readers to be common people. And common people, you have to make it palatable for the common people, for them to understand. So while the people who have assessed my novel before it was published, they say, no, it is commonly readable, it's understandable, it's not that difficult as you'd expect. Now, there have been quite a few reviews and all have been very positive. If you want to try something new, a new taste of a new genre of thriller, which I started with the other books, you might have a go at Eternal Mayhem. It will give you a new dig into a new subgenre of thriller, which I have tried to create, not only for literature of a particular country, but literature as a whole of the community. Thank you.